Verse 5. Somebody read 5 through 9.
The dead are in deep anguish, those beneath the waters and all that live in them. Death is naked before God, destruction lies uncovered. He spreads out the northern skies over empty space. He suspends the earth over nothing. He wraps up the waters in his clouds, yet the clouds do not burst under their weight. He covers the face of the full moon, spreading his clouds over it.
Okay. A lot of scientific facts in this particular passage of Scripture. Now, remember where he was. He was out in the middle of a desert long about the time of Abraham, long before any scientific book was written of any kind. Okay? As late as 1500, what did people think about the earth?
Flat.
Flat? And if you sailed too far?
You fall off.
Off the edge?
Monsters will get you.
Greeks thought there was some poor god had been assigned to hold it up, and we were sitting on his hand. Everybody thought that we kind of lived in a bubble, and the stars were painted on the surface of the bubble. And as late as 1500, there were no solid scientific facts concerning any of this. And anybody that came up with some shortly after that were considered heretics, and some of them were burned at the stake and killed because they said the earth was round or whatever. Let's see what he says. He says, he spreads out the northern skies over empty space. Okay. Now, the prevailing thought was, it was like one of those little snow things with the earth was a base and there was like a glass cover over it and it was all attached and the water kind of seeped through the holes and fell off, and if you got too close to the edge you fell off with the water, and I don't know where you went. But that was the thought. Job says that the sky is suspended over empty space. Now think about it for a minute. He's saying there's no edge, there's no place for the sky to rest. The sky is completely and totally suspended over empty space. That was a pretty profound scientific fact for a man who was living when he was living and observing with what he was observing with. Don't you think? Okay. So this man had some wisdom beyond human logic. Remember that guy that came to me when I was doing the Habitat House, and he was coming at me with human logic, and I was coming back at him with scriptural logic, and he lost miserably the first, second, and third time. Job had that. Now, I've got the advantage of having libraries full of books and tremendous scientific minds giving me things to read and understanding long before it was proven that the earth was round and suspended in space. What's the next thing he said? He wraps up the waters in his clouds, yet the clouds do not burst under their weight. What do you think a cloud weighs?
A lot.
What?
A lot.
A lot. Chris told me that when a thunderstorm comes by, it dumps 100,000 gallons of water per acre.
An inch of water over an acre is 100,000 gallons.
What?
An inch of rain over an acre is 100,000 gallons.
100,000 gallons. If an acre of ground gets an inch of rain, it's 100,000 gallons. A gallon of water weighs 8 pounds. 800,000 pounds of water for 1 acre. And sometimes that thundercloud will go for hundreds of miles, dropping water all the way. So what does that dude weigh? Millions and millions of tons. But we look at them and what they look like. They look like floating cotton across the sky, don't they? Yeah. And how did Job know that the clouds were made up of water vapor? I mean, I could have, you could sit there and you say, well, maybe it's some kind of cotton, maybe it's, And what is holding this water vapor together and keeping it from falling to the ground, I mean, it doesn't make human logical sense to look at a cloud and say, well, that's 190 million tons of water vapor floating around up there. That makes sense? No, not from human logic. It doesn't. But Job looked at it and said, he holds all that water in the clouds. And he suspends it over the earth. And yet the clouds do not burst under the weight. They just float along like they're cotton. Okay. He covers the face of the moon, spreading the clouds over it. He marks out the horizon on the face of the waters for a boundary between light and darkness. Okay. He marks the horizon on the face of the waters for a boundary between light and darkness. Think about that. Outer space, is it predominantly bright or is it predominantly dark?
Dark.
Hmm?
Dark.
Dark. If you get on the, if you're orbiting up there and you get on the dark side of the moon or the dark side of the dark side of the earth, it's pitch black. And you go from extremely high temperatures to absolute zero on the horizon. It just changes that quick. When they were on the moon, they had to be very, very careful not to be outside if the sun wasn't shining on the face of the earth, because it went from 150 degrees to absolute zero when the sun hit the horizon. I mean, it went that cold that quick. Okay. But our atmosphere tends to magnify the light and make it bright down here. You get outside of our atmosphere and it's predominantly black out. How did he know that? Where did that insight come from? You know, people look at this and say, well, it's just a poem. It's just a poem written back wherever, and it really doesn't say a whole lot about God. Well, where did all this insight come from if it didn't come from the creator of the universe? Because he had no way of knowing any of this from human experience. He didn't. Okay. By power he churned up the sea, by his wisdoms he cut Rahab to pieces. Now Rahab was considered to be sort of a Loch Ness monster. You've heard of Nessie, the Loch Ness monster, and there's this big debate on does she exist, does she not exist. People's got pictures of her and videos of her, and kind of like Bigfoot, you know, does he exist, does he not exist? If you go back and look at literature from this time, Rahab was more or less a serpent of the sea. It was some kind of a serpent that lived in the sea that they believed it was. By his power, he churned up the sea. You ever thought about the power of the sea? Remember last spring when the tsunami hit Japan? And I mean, this thing took how many minutes? And in that many minutes, it destroyed a nuclear power plant and wiped out the whole coast of Japan for miles inland. I mean, picked up cars like we would pick up a toy car and set it 7, 8, 9 miles inland. Just picked it up, carried it in and plopped it down and went back out to sea. Look at New York City. The rubble is still piled up 3 times higher than a man's height, and they're working on it every day from daylight to dark, trying to get rid of it. And how long did Sandy last? Less than a day. It washed in, It rained really hard, the wind blew, it went inland, it dissipated, and was over in less than a day. And we're still picking up the mess that the power of the sea exerted on the strongest city in the United States. I mean, this city is made of pure concrete sitting on bedrock of granite. And the sea comes in and just wipes it all away. Just like me taking an eraser and wiping that board clean in one big swipe. And he saw the power of God in the sea. By his breath, the skies become clear, and his hand pierces the gliding serpent. Okay. By his breath, the skies become clear. Now, Job is living at ground level, and he experiences the wind. But what he's probably talking about here is the maker of weather. What would that be? What controls our weather in the winter and the summer?
How far away we are from the sun? How we're rotating?
Okay. Jet stream. Jet stream. If the jet stream settles south of us, we have a cold winter. If it settles north of us, we have a warm winter. And wherever that jet stream settles, that is the dividing line between harsh winter weather or mild winter weather, harsh summer weather or mild summer weather. It also has to do with the angle of the sun in our orbit around the earth, because our earth is tilted, and sometimes we are close to the sun. Sometimes we're close to the sun because we're tilted toward it, and sometimes we're away from the sun because we're tilted away from it. So what Carrie said was correct. But the maker of our weather from a day-to-day basis is that jet stream, or that really fast torrent weather that's up around 50, 60,000 feet in the air. Now, how did Job know that the breath of God controlled the weather, brought in the clear skies, brought in the clouds, and controlled everything that was happening up there? How did he know that? Had to be the wisdom of God that had been imparted of him, because he paid a lot of attention to God. If you go back to the first 2 chapters, he lived his life on a daily, hourly basis with God. He sacrificed, he worshipped, he did it on a daily and almost hourly basis. So that relationship had been established between him and his maker. And he saw God and the attributes of God in everything that had been created. If you turn to Romans chapter 1, it says, the very essence of God has been placed in all the things that he has been creating. And we can understand him by looking at creation, and that we are therefore without excuse. Why do you think natives worship trees and rivers and the jungle? Because missionaries hadn't showed up and said, let me introduce you to Jesus. But they look at nature and they see God's provision, God's protection, and they see all the attributes of God in the things that are keeping them safe, are providing for their nourishment, are giving them transportation and protection from their enemies. They worship the river because the river is full of food, full of water, and protection from their enemies. All these things, and they see the power of God in that river. It was the same with the Indians in the far west when they had the great white buffalo. And they worshiped the buffalo because the buffalo gave them nourishment, gave them tools to do their daily work with, their bones. The hide was used for blankets and to build buildings out of. And they worshiped the buffalo because they saw the great white spirit or the provision of God in that buffalo. Okay? Now, did that make them heathens? No more than it makes Job heathen. When Job says God, he doesn't say Jehovah. He's talking about a greater being. If you go back and you look at the ancient Hebrew and you look at the word God in Job, it's not the same word that you find in the Hebrew writings where they use the word Jehovah. They had a name for him. Job knew he was there. He recognized his presence. He recognized his power. He recognized his supremacy. But he never ever had the Jewish name for him because he wasn't a Jew. He was just a man that loved God in all that he did. He pierced the hand of the gliding serpent. A lot of commentaries refer this to a dragon or a pterodactyl. Okay. What do you think? Think dragons were real?
Yes.
Hmm?
Yes.
And they spit fire?
Sure.
Sure.
What?
Sure.
Sure, okay. I got one. Anybody else? Well, you're right. Dragon. You know, we have a lizard today that has 2 glands in his mouth, and when he spits those 2 glands out, those chemicals go together, and they form a very extremely caustic spray that will set things on fire. Now, we're going to get into dinosaurs later on. But what happened to the dinosaurs, do you think? The pterodactyl and the big gliding serpent. What do you think happened to them?
God destroyed them.
Hmm?
God destroyed them. God destroyed them.
God destroyed them. How do you think he destroyed them? The ice age of the science books, do you think?
Flood.
50 million years ago?
Flood.
Flood. Flood. Do you
Flood.
say flood? Flood. Yeah. Flood.
I say asteroid hit the Earth and it so much debris went in the sky and the sunlight
Okay.
blocked out and killed all.
I read that. And there's big craters all over the Earth. We have trees kind of, you can see them real good on the moon because they don't have trees masking them and camouflaging them. But asteroids have hit the Earth and the craters are there to prove it. Okay. Now, if it was the flood, the big flood, that means that they were here as early as 4,500 years ago.
Some of them.
That's when the flood was, 4,500 years ago. So we got a little conflict here. Were they 4,500 years ago, or were they 350 million years ago? What do you think?
400.
Hmm?
The first one. 400.
4,500 years ago.
4,400.
Okay. Now, I'm not trying to tear up every science book in the world and throw it away. Okay, but I want to give you a different perspective to think about. Prior to the flood, when God said, after the flood, God said, if I let man live for a long time, he just gets more and more evil, so I'm going to limit his days to 120 years. That's what he told Noah after the flood was over. Okay. Prior to the flood, how long did men live?
600.
800, 900,
600,
700. Methuselah was
69.
Huh?
969.
969. Methuselah was I was thinking 968, but I think you're right, 969. So he lived 969 years. Well, the animals did too. Now, what family did the dinosaurs belong to?
Reptile.
Reptiles. All the dinosaurs were reptiles. What is unique about the reptiles?
Body temperature.
Hmm?
Whatever the surrounding temperature is, that's their body temperature.
They what?
Body temperature.
Body temperature, they're cold-blooded. Okay, what else? They never stop growing. Human beings, we get to 6'3" and we quit growing. Our bodies change, our hormones change, and we stop the growth process. Reptiles never stop growing. That's why snakes molt. They get too big for their skin, they outgrow their skin. So they crawl up on a beam in my basement and they shed their skin, and then they crawl back outside, and my wife finds the skin and yells at me to come down and get rid of it. But that snake just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until it dies. Now, prior to the flood, there's no reason to think that reptiles didn't live as long as men did. Now, if you had a reptile that was continually growing for 900 years, how big would that dude get?
Big.
Huh?
Big.
Right. The first year he'd be an inch, the second year he'd be 2 inches, and then 4 inches, and then 8 inches, and he'd just keep going and keep going and keep going until he ended up being a what?
Dinosaur.
A dinosaur. Exactly true. Now, there's another little thing I want to hit before we get through with this. It says that all species of animals were on the ark. Were dinosaurs on the ark?
Yes.
If they started out 2 inches, yeah, they were on the ark. On the ark. And but the deal is with the way the climate changed and the water vapor was taken off the earth, and this gets real complicated. And the ultraviolet rays of the sun began to pound us and destroy our cells and our genes and whatever. And we ended up living, an old man is 90 years old, 100 years old, okay? Well, an old lizard now is 12, 14, 15 years old. But if you take that same lizard and you let that lizard grow for 900 years, you're going to be looking at a dinosaur. And the growth is exponential. He doesn't grow an inch a year. The first year he grows an inch, and the second year he grows 2 inches, and then that 2 inches becomes 4 inches, and it becomes exponential. And in a 900 years, if you go and you calculate it out, you're looking at a dinosaur in 900 years. Yeah. Now, think about that for a minute, because that's scientific fact. Okay. And you've got that lizard that spits those 2 sprays and sets things on fire because of the heat of the 2 chemicals. You know, most mythical things are found in fact. It gets distorted over the years, and people seem to embellish it and make fantastic stories up about it. But most mythical things are found in fact. And dragons pretty much could be explained by what we have on Earth today. And we got to go upstairs.